What's up, everyone? Welcome to my channel. My name is Cassie, and today is Witchy Wednesday, which we're not actually talking about like paranormal per se. We're going to be talking about the Loch Ness. The Loch Ness Monster, obviously. I don't know if you heard, but end of August they did one of the largest surface investigations of the Loch Ness to try and find Nessie. I think it was like the biggest surface investigation since like the 1970s. So I don't believe they found anything. I saw a lot of articles and stuff talking about the investigation, but not any findings, which is unsurprising, but we're going to talk about it because I'm intrigued. I love the Loch Ness Monster. I love the Loch Ness. Celtic heritage was kind of big in my family growing up, at least from my mom's side. So it's kind of fun to just kind of keep track of that stuff. And I really like it. I just think it's an interesting thing. I think Scotland is a really beautiful country, and I think the Loch Ness Monster is a really intriguing monster. So we're going to talk about that today, because I do what I want. Anyway, if you like this video, leave a like, subscribe. If you dislike it, but leave a comment either way, because I love to hear what you have to say. And let's get started. So, the Loch Ness Monster, right? So first of all, for those of you who might not know, I think everyone pretty much does know, but it's one of those, weirdly well-known facts, but that nobody ever remembers being told. But Loch means lake. So, the Loch Ness Monster literally means lake monster. So, the Loch Ness is one of Europe, well, I wouldn't say Europe, UK's, I guess, biggest lakes. It's about 22 square miles, I believe, and around 800 feet deep. But the interesting thing about it is they found little pockets in the lake with sonar. So we know it's very deep, but we also know that there's some sort of tunnel systems possibly going out to the ocean. So that's a lot of the reason people believe that it still exists despite the overwhelming lack of concrete evidence of the Loch Ness Monster. But, it's water. We're not very good at water. If you don't know, about 92%, I believe, 93%, something around that, of the world's oceans are unexplored. So, we don't have a lot of things that tolerate water very well, and I think that's why this legend persists, despite the overwhelming lack of evidence. And a lot of scientists are very skeptical of it, obviously, which is not surprising. But the interesting thing about the Loch Ness Monster and the Loch Ness history is it spans back about 1,400 years. A lot of, the chupacabra, things like that, they come in much later. We start seeing sightings within, 1900s. The Loch Ness Monster is not that way. We have had reports of monster sightings, water sightings of a monster for centuries, early 80s. So I think that's a lot of the magic of the Loch Ness Monster and why a lot of people continue to believe it no matter what. Also, just the fact that with any of these kind of monsters or paranormal stuff ever, and I say it all the time too, is people are always prove that it exists, but it's also prove that it doesn't, and that's another reason I think a lot of these monsters still have persistent beliefs in them. So the earliest report of it was actually 565 AD, so very early, and it was I think a journal. It was a journal written by an Irish monk that talked about a man being killed by a lake monster or water monster. Now, there's a lot of speculation on all of this, because of the fact that so much of European, you're gonna find this across the world, but a European legend especially really delves into water monsters. You see a lot of the sea monsters, you see water gods, things like that. And especially when you're talking about Scotland and Ireland and those communities which are islands, you see that other places too, Japan, things like that, where they have pretty heavy legends as far as water monsters go, because they're an island and, they see weird shit in the ocean and don't know how to explain it. And though the Loch Ness is not the ocean, but it is a very large lake and has a lot of unexplained things in it to begin with. Early 80s when it happened, right? When we first started hearing about it, which is much earlier than you can really expect when you think about modern legends, right? But you hear reports of it, people either orally passing it on or writing about it, up to modern day, you have in the 1800s, in the 1900s, in the 1700s, you have reports of it from people who are well liked and well respected, doctors, things like that, to just random tourists seeing things. We've got videos and photos and all that fun stuff. But it's one of those, again, water. What is it? You know, it's hard to identify things that are in the water. For the most part, though, a lot of these reports actually kind of correspond. Some monsters you get like the Jersey Devil and things, so you get a lot of different versions of it, and there is some different versions, but pretty much all of them identify the Loch Ness Monster as some kind of wriggling snake-like creature with little stubby legs. And then in 1933, that's when the Loch Ness Monster craze really kind of kicked off, right? An article was published about it in May of 1993. And it was written by Alex Campbell, but talking about somebody else's, I think it was Aldi McKay. I'm really bad with names and dates, so I have to, like, look at my notes. Anyway, she, talked about seeing this beast in the waters, and it was kind of the same thing, a writhing creature, you know, a large, writhing, snake-like looking creature thing. And, now the only thing with that is later on when she got interviewed, Aldi McKay, not the original reporter, she did say she admitted to knowing that there were legends of a water monster in the area. So, you know, there's a lot of speculation, especially when it comes to, like, Sasquatch and things like that and other monsters of people. You know, you have these legends in the area, people hear about it, something kicks it off, and suddenly everyone has these experiences, which is very common and pretty understandable, I'd say. Whether or not they're actually seeing things and just feel more comfortable coming forward, or they just want the attention because people want attention constantly. Who knows? Can't really say. We weren't there, we didn't know what they saw, you know, but there is a lot of skepticism there because of the fact that, especially in these areas like the Loch Ness where there's been these legends for so long, people kind of, you know, they want attention. They're like, oh, I saw it too, you know, but they could also have seen it. You know, legends start from something. I'm a big believer that every legend has a basis in truth. Now, what is that truth? Is it something completely mundane, like a log that they just saw, couldn't figure it out, whatever, and it got away from them? Maybe. Now, in the end of August, they launched one of the biggest water surveys of the Loch Ness Monster, like surface surveys. It was the biggest one that they've done since, like, the 1970s. As far as I'm aware, they didn't find anything, unsurprisingly. They did a bunch of sonar and stuff like that, and didn't find anything. Does that mean that there's nothing there? Not necessarily. They didn't find anything. They've never found anything. They've done sonar, they've done dives, they've done all sorts of things over the years. They launched the biggest one recently, and they didn't find anything. And that's the interesting thing. So, there's a lot of theories. The Loch Ness Monster, or the Loch Ness, is connected to the ocean. And Greenland sharks, if you know what they are, have been known to enter freshwater at times. They can survive pretty much anything. They're really cool. And so there's a theory that maybe it's a Greenland shark coming in because the Loch Ness does have an abundance of salmon and other larger fish. It is a large lake. If you don't know what Greenland sharks are, they are very, very massive, creepy-looking sharks that survive hundreds of years, move very slowly, and survive in cold water. So they're not what we think of usually when we think of sharks. We think of the great white shark, you know, Jaws, things like that. The Greenland shark is not like that. So if you lived in Scotland, especially in, like, you know, 500 AD, and saw a Greenland shark coming to the surface for whatever reason, these are usually deep water, cold water sharks, yeah, that would be fairly freaksome. Like, yeah, water is fucking weird. It also, like, can take a perfectly, like, reasonable log and make it look like it's moving. So I could see that. I could 100% see that for some of the accounts. I don't think logs and fallen trees explain the people who've been living by the lake that did this stuff, or living near water who talked about this stuff. Because most people who spend a lot of time on water are going to know what a log in water looks like. Moreover, I feel like not everyone's a fucking idiot, you know? I think that's a big leap for scientists every time. And I love science. I really do. That's what I studied. I still study it. But I do think scientists, like, have this kind of weird bias. And I see it. I really do see it. I saw it in college. I saw it when I worked with scientists. They have this weird bias of believing that everyone is idiots. And no, don't get me wrong. I think a lot of people are idiots. So I'm not necessarily disagreeing. But I feel like a lot of scientists really do believe that everyone who isn't a scientist, or isn't them, realistically, are idiots. And they kind of use that to explain things. Of like, oh, it was a log. These hundreds of reports, they were all logs. You know? And it's like, okay, I will give you, there's probably a significant portion of them that were completely stupid reasons. But I don't genuinely believe that everyone in the entire world can't figure out what a log in water is. You know, I feel like there's a bit of a bias there when it comes to scientists. But I digress. So the lack of sonar confirmation can be pretty easily explained because of the fact that the Loch Ness does connect via underwater pathways and caves and caverns and stuff to the ocean, and I believe other lakes as well. They have done a lot of research. They've done sonars. They've even done, like, DNA surveys of the area. And most of what they found is eels. I think this is a better, more likely phenomenon. Because if you haven't seen eels, some eels get very fucking big. And they have a snake-like motion. A lot of them do come up to the surface pretty often. The only issue with this thing is while eels of extreme size have been found in other parts of the world, none have ever been found in the Loch Ness. Not eels, we have found eels. We have not found large eels. So that kind of is the same issue as, you know, the Greenland shark. We found shark DNA, we found eel DNA, and we found, like, large sturgeon DNA. But we haven't ever found an animal of the size that the Loch Ness Monster has been reported. So could it be a Greenland shark that comes in and out? Yeah. Could it be a Loch Ness Monster that comes in and out? Also, technically, yeah. If we're going with the Greenland shark or eel theory, if you haven't found these large animals that you're assuming that it is, then what's to say it's not another large animal? So there's some issues with those kind of explanations that I've seen. Again, it's kind of like scientists wanting to just be like, well, we know what this animal is, so it's got to be that, even though we haven't found that animal of that size, or even a similar size. And they have found, like, catfish DNA and stuff. And if you don't know, there is a species of catfish known in Europe that's known as the Wells catfish. It's fairly not known by a lot of people, I think. I think it's pretty well known by people in Europe. But in America, this is not a very common catfish. It is an introduced species in a few areas, but they're not really around here. We see things more like the channel cats and stuff, which don't get that big. But Wells catfish are very large. They almost look like eels. And they're very aggressive. They're very, very invasive. So could it be one of those? Yeah, that's as likely as an eel or a Greenland shark. I mean, it could be any of these. It could be all of these. The issue is we don't know. We do know some of the reportings have been hoaxes, which I think we can always assume that there's a fairly large percentage of all of these things that get popular that are going to be hoaxes. So this is unsurprising. But again, is every single one a hoax? But like I said before, some of these sightings were reported by people who have a lot of good reputation. Like the really famous picture of the Loch Ness was actually taken by a gynecologist. Or reportedly, I think. So, you know, people tend to believe the scientists, the doctors, people with a lot of education. I know from experience, these are not always great people, and they are just as likely to say shit they don't mean, but they're more likely to care about their reputation than, like, a random tourist. So, it's interesting. There was a few theories that didn't really get a whole lot of traction, but kind of circulated a while back, that the Loch Ness Monster was actually a, like, dinosaur, like a plesiosaur or something, since it does have a marked resemblance to that. that pretty much was debunked immediately because of the age of the Loch Ness. So Loch Ness is only about 10,000 years old. It is not a man-made lake, obviously. It is a natural lake, but it is only about 10,000-ish years old. Realistically, it's not an old lake, and it's certainly not old enough to house a random dinosaur, unless the dinosaur came from the ocean. That being said, the ocean is pretty particular on environments. Like, something coming up from the Mariana Trench is not gonna be on the surface, not alive. You know, we see pictures of the blobfish all the time, and they look like they do, like the funny haha look, because they're a deep water animal that was pulled to the surface rapidly, and that change in environment caused those distortions. So, you know, they're pretty particular. If we're talking about like a deep water dinosaur, they could exist for sure. We don't really know. We haven't explored that much of the ocean realistically. But it is unlikely to come to the surface on its own, because if it is a deep water animal that we just haven't found that's very large, like I feel like we probably are going to end up finding something like that when we really start exploring deeper waters at some point. But they're not likely to leave their environment because they're built for that environment. They're not going to come to the surface where the water temperature and water pressure is so drastically different. Like I said, it's just kind of like the blobfish or the oarfish all over again. Even if they survived, it's unlikely that they're going to naturally come up. But I think if that was actually the case, I think that we wouldn't have so many reports, first of all, because I feel like it would be like a one-off issue. And two, again, I feel like we would have some kind of body evidence or DNA evidence of it because of the fact that it likely wouldn't survive the process of coming up from the deep ocean. So I don't think it's like a deep water animal. I don't really think it's a dinosaur. I don't think necessarily that dinosaurs aren't living in the ocean because, again, we don't know. We have rediscovered several like dinosaur-esque animals from the ocean that we thought were completely extinct, so look at us go. Who knows? I don't know. I'm a really iffy on the Loch Ness Monster because I feel like we should have found something at this point if it is not one of the random species that we know are in the lake. But we have had recent discoveries of a lot of things. So, like, I don't know. Who knows? What do you think? Do you think the Loch Ness Monster is real? And if it is, what do you think it is? I'm curious to see. Anyway, that's it for this video. I will see you next time. Bye!